Okay, here we are. This is Grooving in G, and I'm bringing you my last ever, maybe not ever, but certainly my last of this series, Audio Finder tutorial. Now, to save myself going over stuff I've already done with this program, what I'm actually going to talk about today is combining Audio Finder with other programs. So we're going to start with something called Mixed in Key, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this, but let's get right into it. Okay, so what this program does is you can drag your samples into this main window here and it'll analyze them for you. And it's pretty accurate and it will tell you what key it thinks your samples are in. Now, one of the problems here is that because Audio Finder doesn't actually read any of the metadata of the files, it uses its own metadata. So you can't actually add the key information from Mixed in Key into Audio Finder. What you can do is, like I've just done, is drag a bunch of files from Audio Finder into Mixed in Key. So it's gone and analysed all these files. Now I can order this list and I've got now an idea of what key these songs are in. So if I'm working in something in C major, and this works much better if you drag a whole bunch of files, say like 1,000 files, you get a lot more to look at. But if I'm working in C minor even, I can drag these back in and I know they're all C minor. Now I can go through and write the key in, but here you can't specify if it's major or minor. You can just put the root note. So you could write this in category or genre and write C minor there so you can see what key they're all in, but I don't actually really bother with doing that. I just do this specifically for projects. If I'm working on a project where I want to use some old records, I have this tag I call record cuts, which is all my sample chops. So I've got loads of chopped records in here, a lot of which I've done myself. And I'll just select like a huge portion of these, drag them all into Mixed in Key. Okay, so now it's analysed all these files in Mixed in Key and I've ordered them by the key that it's found. So if I'm making a song in A minor, I've now got, if I drag these back into Audio Finder, I've got all these samples now. These are chops of records. If I turn the sound on, that are all, it thinks they're all in A minor, and Mixed in Key is very good. It will have got very close to getting the key right for all of them. And this is where it works especially well for is little chops of records. You can combine them all together. Often you can get a bit kind of stagnant and stuck when you start diving around looking for samples to pair up with your songs, and this can be a very good way of going about it, which is a bit more streamlined. Okay, so the other program I like to use with Audio Finder is called Meta, and it's a metadata organizer. So the reason I've been using this program for a while is because it doesn't have any of the file folder problems that Audio Finder does. So as you can see, this folder has got subfolders inside of it and samples in all those folders. But when I can drag this into Meta and it'll just give me all the audio files for that whole file, and then I can select these and drag them into Audio Finder. So I've always found that more useful and a bit quicker than the other workflow, which is to drag them onto your device browser and then you hit scan. The problem with this workflow is that you can't actually stack multiple folders on the device browser and then go to scan. You've got to do them all individually. In Meta, however, you can drag multiple folders in and then drag them into Audio Finder. So it does have its uses. I'm sure lots of other programs will give you this functionality. And the reason I like Meta is because it's just analysing the metadata, so it's really quick. It just did 1,700 samples in a couple of seconds there, so you're not waiting around for it. Now, because Audio Cortex is now up and running, we can actually use this to do something similar where you can drag multiple folders into the drop zone of Audio Cortex. Now, the only disadvantage of this compared to Meta is that it is a bit slower. See, it's done 50 samples in the time that Meta does the whole lot. So you're hanging around waiting for this to analyze them. Now, you do get all this nice information which you might find useful of the samples and what Audio Cortex is thinking they sound like. But if that's not very useful for you and the files are already well named, or you don't need to tag them, then I do still use Meta a lot for getting folders quickly into Audio Finder. So there is one other way in Audio Finder that you can get multiple folders in quickly or relatively easily, and that is using scan setup. So what you can do is you go scan setup, and then you add a new scan and select a name, and then you select your scan set and you go edit, and then you can add folders. You can add your folders in one by one this way. You can't drag them straight in, which would be a lot more convenient, but it's not too bad. And so now I've got these 3 folders in. You click OK, and then you see where it says scan. You've got to have this one selected, this scan tutorial scan, and I clicked off there and then went back on it and it scanned it. Or you can click refresh. And so if you've then scanned some and you want to add another folder to it, you can come back to this tutorial scan, go back to edit, go back to add some more samples, and then you can refresh there and it'll add those samples in for you. So all of these samples are now in. So yeah, for trying to do the same thing and get stack folders into Audio Finder from your Finder, I still think Meta is the quickest way to do this. Okay, so I've talked about Audio Cortex a fair bit now on my channel, and I'm actually going to jump past Audio Cortex and I'm going to go on to my favourite program besides Audio Finder, and this is something called Twisted Wave. Okay, so I have it set up in Audio Finder that whenever I double click a file in Audio Finder, it actually opens into Twisted Wave. Now this just opened into another window, and this is essentially just another audio editor, but it has some really, really cool features which I will go through. This is what I'm going to do my next tutorial series on. But I just wanted to talk about some of the advantages of this program and using it with Audio Finder. Now, to get your files in Audio Finder to open with the program, you come down to this little settings wheel here in the bottom left, and you can go to Open With, Tool Setup, and you just add your application into this window. So now when I double click a file, it opens into Twisted Wave. Now, the first reason I love this program is because it actually is destructive editing. What I mean by that is whenever you normalize a file or process a file in Audio Finder, it'll create a copy. So if I come down to process and I normalize this file, it adds this little N and it's normalized the file. Now, sometimes I find myself just wanting to edit the original file and not always create a duplicate. This is especially true when I'm normalizing files, because I might have a whole playlist of files that I want to bring up. So I've got some samples, and they're just some jump samples that I've got from the internet, but I want to normalize these files and bring them all up to 0dB or whatever it is. And Twisted Wave has this awesome batch processing where I think I've got a saved batch. You can create a script and save it, and this is just I'm normalizing to -1 and then saving the files, and so I can just drag them from Audio Finder into this batch processing, and I can start the process. It's going to overwrite the files. Okay, and that's done. It's now normalized all these files just directly. It's just saved them on top of the files. So I don't have to now worry about having all these copies of files I've normalized and not normalized and whatever it is. It's really handy. Yeah, so it's got this batch processing and destructive editing in Twisted Wave, which I find really complements Audio Finder and helps kind of counteract the non-destructive nature of Audio Finder. You can use a program with a bit more of a destructive workflow. Following on from that, the sample tool inside of Audio Finder, it doesn't actually have a tab to transient feature where I can kind of notch to these samples, and I'll show you in Twisted Wave how handy it is. So if you're doing a drum break like this, in Twisted Wave you press the tab button and it snaps. Yeah, it has an automatic version of what the sample tool has, where it's using this impulse response to detect transients. Twisted Wave has automatically got this, and you can essentially just tab around and then set markers and do all kinds of cool things where you can select chunks of them and you can crop that out and you can reverse that selection like this, and you can do all kinds of cool stuff in here. I find this amazingly useful for drum breaks, but I actually do loads of stuff which I will get into in my next tutorial series when I'm recording hardware synths and recording vocal takes, and I use this for so much stuff. It's really a very essential part of my workflow. You can use Twisted Wave to record whichever input you set. Now I kind of combine this recording function with the really handy feature of my audio interface, which allows me to do loopback recording. So I can set, if I go and set my input to be my interface, and then I can select the channels I want to go in, and it has these two loopback channels, which basically means it's recording your system output. It's recording anything that goes through your computer, and I can record that sample. Now this works for YouTube, anything. You can record absolutely anything that's going through your computer. You can even record Audio Finder if you want to, and that'll come in. And now I've got this sample, I can normalize it there. Catch me in the south, yeah, the pink and thumb. And so you get the recordings into your computer really easily. I find it much more convenient to use Twisted Wave than to open up my DAW. If I want to, I can start adding effects. You can do these kind of effect stacks where you can apply multiple effects, where Audio Finder you can only apply one effect, which is useful, but I think Twisted Wave kind of is a better specific sample editor. It's more in line with Adobe Audition. It looks quite basic, but it's actually got some really cool functions. You can also select different channels. So if I select this top portion here, I can actually amplify this top channel, and you can see in this sample, if I look at it now, this right side is a lot louder than the left side. So if I can just bump this up just by looking at it, and that's too much, but that's probably maybe from one more dB up. And I've got a better equal stereo recording than I actually took off the internet. Twisted Wave is an absolute monster, and I'm going to get into loads of fun and interesting stuff in this program in the future, but hopefully this is just giving you a good little overview of a few programs you can combine with Audio Finder to enhance it. Thank you for anyone who has been following my Audio Finder tutorial series. I look forward to bringing you a whole lot more content on Twisted Wave in the coming weeks, and if I have missed something else out, or there's something that you want me to go over again, then give me a shout on my YouTube channel, and I'll do my best to help you with whatever it is. So yeah, thanks for listening. Yeah, summer's coming to Europe, and COVID's looking like it might be over fairly soon, so the future is bright.